The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in August 1882, and Zelda Crawford watched her entire world crumble into dust as she read the stark words inked across the thin paper. Her theatrical agent in San Francisco had sent the message via the new Western Union office in Bonanza, Colorado, and the porter who delivered it to the Grand Opera House looked almost apologetic as he handed it over. Zelda's fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper, her green eyes scanning the brief message that would change everything. Replacement actress secured. Contract void. Return to San Francisco immediately for settlement. She stood backstage in her dressing room, surrounded by the costumes and makeup that had been her armor for the past 3 months. The Grand Opera House was Bonanza's pride, a 2-story building with velvet curtains and gas lamps that attracted audiences from mining camps throughout the Colorado Territory. Zelda had been performing nightly as the lead in various melodramas, her powerful voice and dramatic presence drawing packed crowds who paid good money to see culture in the rugged mountains. Now, according to her agent, someone younger and cheaper had taken her place in the San Francisco theater company she had worked so hard to join. At 24, Zelda had dedicated her entire life to the stage. She had left her family's farm in Missouri at 18, determined to make something of herself beyond the endless cycle of planting and harvesting. 6 years of traveling theater companies, dusty stages in frontier towns, and constant rejection had finally led to that coveted contract with the prestigious Montgomery Theater Company in San Francisco. She had been 1 performance away from leaving Bonanza to begin her new position when this telegram arrived. "Miss Crawford," the stage manager's voice carried through the thin door, "we need to discuss tonight's performance." Zelda took a steadying breath and opened the door. Harold Mitchell stood in the narrow hallway, his expression grave. He was a portly man in his 50s with thinning gray hair and perpetually worried eyes. "I received a telegram as well," Harold said quietly, "from the Montgomery Theater Company. They are requesting reimbursement for the advance they provided you." The advance. $300 that Zelda had used to pay off debts and purchase new costumes suitable for a prestigious San Francisco stage, money she no longer had. "I don't understand," Zelda said, her voice tight. "My contract was signed. Everything was arranged." Harold shifted uncomfortably. Apparently, the theater owner's niece arrived from New York. She wanted the role, and family connections trumped contractual obligations. "I am sorry, Miss Crawford. I have seen this happen before in this business." Zelda sank into the chair by her dressing table, the telegram crinkling in her fist. "What am I supposed to do? I have no money to return the advance, and my contract here ends in 2 days." "I wish I could extend your engagement," Harold said with genuine regret, "but the fall season is already booked with a traveling Shakespeare troupe. There is simply no room in the budget." After Harold left, Zelda sat in silence, staring at her reflection in the mirror surrounded by flickering candles. Her dark hair was pinned in an elaborate style, and stage makeup still colored her cheeks from the afternoon rehearsal. She had always been told she was beautiful, with high cheekbones and expressive eyes that could convey emotion even from the back row. But beauty meant nothing without opportunity, and in the theatrical world, connections and luck mattered more than talent. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Harold with more bad news. Instead, a tall man in dusty riding clothes stepped into the doorway, his hat in his hands. Zelda recognized him immediately as one of the regulars who attended her performances, always sitting in the same seat in the 3rd row. He had dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, gray eyes that seemed to assess everything with calm intelligence. and a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. Unlike many of the miners and cowboys who frequented the opera house, he always wore clean clothes and maintained a quiet dignity. "Miss Crawford," he said in a deep, measured voice, "forgive the intrusion. I am Ryder Xavier, and I could not help but overhear your conversation with Mr. Mitchell. The walls in this building are unfortunately thin." Zelda stood, instinctively straightening her posture despite her emotional turmoil. "Mr. Xavier, I apologize that you were subjected to my personal difficulties. No apology necessary." He took a step into the room, his presence somehow making the small space feel even smaller. "I actually came backstage because I have a proposition that might interest you, given your current circumstances." Zelda's guard went up immediately. She had dealt with enough opportunistic men in her career to recognize when someone might be taking advantage of a vulnerable situation. "I assure you, Mr. Xavier, I am not interested in any improper arrangements." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Nothing improper, I promise. I own a ranch about 15 miles west of Bonanza, near the base of Mount Lincoln. The Xavier Ranch has been in operation for 12 years, and we run cattle and horses across 5,000 acres. I also have a younger sister, Rebecca, who is 17 and has been desperate for culture and education beyond what I can provide. I have been thinking for months about hiring a tutor and companion for her, someone who could teach her literature, music, and the refinements that she craves." "You want me to be a governess?" Zelda tried to keep the skepticism from her voice. "I want to hire you to be a teacher and companion for Rebecca, yes. The position would include room and board in a private cabin on the ranch property, along with a salary of $50 per month. It would not be stage work, but it would provide you with income and time to sort out your situation with the theater company." $50 per month was actually more than Zelda had been making with her theatrical performances, once she accounted for the costs of lodging and costumes. But the idea of giving up the stage, even temporarily, felt like admitting defeat. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Xavier, but I am an actress, not a teacher. I have no experience with education." "You have culture, intelligence, and grace," Ryder said simply. "Rebecca does not need a stern schoolmarm teaching her multiplication tables. She needs someone who can show her that there is more to life than this ranch, someone who can inspire her imagination and help her develop into the woman she wants to become. From what I have seen of your performances over the past months, you would be perfect for that role." Zelda studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. But Ryder Xavier's gray eyes were steady and sincere, and something in his straightforward manner suggested he was a man who said what he meant. "Why me specifically?" she asked. "There must be other women in Bonanza who would be suitable. There are widows and shopkeepers' wives, certainly. But none of them have your experience with the wider world, and none of them would understand Rebecca's dreams the way someone who has pursued her own dreams would understand." He paused, then added quietly, "And I suspect none of them find themselves in need of immediate employment and housing." It was a pragmatic observation, not a cruel one, and Zelda appreciated his honesty. She looked around her dressing room at the costumes hanging on hooks and the makeup scattered across her table. The stage had been her entire identity for 6 years. Could she really walk away from it, even temporarily? But the alternative was returning to San Francisco with no money, no prospects, and a debt she could not pay. At least at the Xavier Ranch, she would have time to figure out her next move. "I would need to finish my contracted performances here," Zelda said slowly. "I have 2 more nights. Of course, I would not expect you to break your professional commitments." Ryder placed his hat back on his head. I will return on Thursday morning with a wagon to transport you and your belongings to the ranch. If you find the position is not to your liking after a trial period, I will pay you for your time and provide transportation back to Bonanza. You are being very generous for someone who does not know me. I am a good judge of character, Miss Crawford, and I have watched you perform for 3 months. You bring joy to people's lives, even in this rough town. That is worth a great deal. After he left, Zelda sat down again, her mind racing. The practical part of her knew this was the best option available, perhaps the only option. But the dreamer in her, the part that had driven her to leave Missouri and pursue the impossible, felt like this was surrender. She picked up the telegram again, reading the cold words that had dismissed years of work with such casual efficiency. Replacement actress secured. As if she were nothing more than a broken piece of equipment that could be swapped out for a newer model. For the first time since leaving home, Zelda allowed herself to cry. Not gentle, theatrical tears, but harsh, frustrated sobs that shook her shoulders and smeared her makeup. She cried for the dreams that seemed to slip further away every year, for the exhaustion of constantly fighting for recognition, for the loneliness of a life spent moving from town to town with no real home. When the tears finally subsided, she looked at herself in the mirror again. Her face was blotchy and red, her hair coming loose from its pins. She looked nothing like the composed actress who graced the stage each night. She looked like what she was, a woman approaching the edge of her youth, with limited options and a talent that the world seemed determined not to appreciate. But she was also a survivor. She had made it this far through determination and resilience, and she would not let one setback destroy her completely. Zelda cleaned her face, repinned her hair, and went to inform Harold that she would be completing her final 2 performances as contracted, but would not be available for any future bookings. He looked relieved that she was not demanding compensation for the broken contract, and they parted on good terms. That night's performance was bittersweet. Zelda poured every ounce of emotion into her portrayal of a noble woman wronged by society, and the audience responded with thunderous applause. As she took her final bow, she spotted Ryder Xavier in his usual 3rd-row seat, clapping along with everyone else. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. The next day, Zelda packed her belongings into 2 large trunks and a carpet bag. Costumes, books, sheet music, and the few personal items she had accumulated over 6 years of travel. Everything she owned fit into 3 containers, a sobering reminder of how little she had to show for her dedication. Her final performance on Wednesday night drew an even larger crowd than usual, as word had spread that this would be Miss Crawford's last appearance in Bonanza. The miners and cowboys who had grown accustomed to her presence seemed genuinely sad to see her go, and several approached the stage door afterward to express their appreciation. "You brought some class to this town, madam," one grizzled prospector said, turning his hat in his weathered hands. "We will miss seeing you up there." Zelda thanked them all graciously, touched by their sincerity. For all its roughness, Bonanza had been kind to her in its way. The people here had appreciated her performances and treated her with respect, which was more than she could say for some of the supposedly civilized cities she had worked in. Thursday morning arrived with clear blue skies and the crisp mountain air that made Colorado beautiful, even in late summer. Zelda waited outside the Grand Opera House with her luggage, wearing a practical traveling dress of dark blue cotton. The elaborate stage clothes were packed away, replaced by the more modest attire suitable for ranch life. Ryder Xavier arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses. He climbed down and immediately moved to help with her trunks, lifting them into the wagon bed with surprising ease. He was stronger than his lean frame suggested, his movements efficient and practiced. "Good morning, Miss Crawford," he said, offering his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. "Ready for a new adventure?" "Ready or not, it seems to be happening," Zelda replied, settling onto the wooden bench. The seat was hard and practical, nothing like the cushioned chairs in theater dressing rooms. As they left Bonanza behind, following a dirt road that wound through pine forests and open meadows, Ryder kept up a steady conversation about the area. He pointed out landmarks and explained the geography with the easy knowledge of someone who had spent years learning every detail of the land. Bonanza grew up around the mining claims, he explained as they passed an abandoned shaft. Silver and lead, mostly. The town is only about 10 years old, but it has grown fast. Some say it will become one of the major cities in Colorado Territory. "You believe that?" Zelda asked, genuinely curious. Ryder shrugged. "Depends on how long the ore holds out. Mining towns can disappear as quickly as they appear once the resources are gone. But the land itself will remain, and that is what matters to ranchers like me." "How did you come to own a ranch in Colorado?" "My father was a cavalry officer stationed at Fort Garland after the Civil War. He fell in love with this country and claimed land under the Homestead Act in 1870. I was 14 when we moved here from Ohio. My mother died of fever that first winter, and my father raised Rebecca and me on his own until he passed 3 years ago from a riding accident." "I am sorry for your losses," Zelda said softly. "Life out here is hard, but it is honest. You know where you stand with the land and the animals. They do not play games or make false promises." He glanced at her sideways. "Not like the theater world, I imagine." "The theater has its own honesty," Zelda defended. "When you are on stage, you cannot hide who you are. The audience sees through pretense immediately. Yet you spend your time pretending to be other people. I spend my time showing people emotions and truths they might not otherwise experience." "There is a difference between pretense and performance." Ryder's expression softened. "I meant no offense. I have great respect for what you do. The joy and beauty you bring to people's lives is real, even if the characters are fiction." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon creaking over the rough road. The landscape was breathtaking, with mountains rising in the distance and wildflowers dotting the meadows. Zelda had performed in towns throughout the West, but she had rarely taken the time to truly appreciate the beauty of the land itself. "Tell me about Rebecca," she said eventually. "What should I know about her?" Ryder's entire demeanor changed when he spoke about his sister, his voice filling with affection and concern. "Rebecca is bright, curious, and frustrated. She reads every book she can get her hands on, practices piano on the old instrument my mother brought from Ohio, and dreams of cities she has never seen. I do my best, but I am a rancher, not a teacher. I can teach her how to manage accounts and run a business, but I cannot give her the cultural education she craves. Why not send her to school in Denver or back east? Because she is 17 and impulsive, and I worry about her being taken advantage of by people who would see a naive ranch girl as easy prey." He said it matter-of-factly, without apology. "In a year or two, when she is older and wiser, I will support whatever path she chooses. But right now, she needs guidance from someone who understands both the appeal of those dreams and the reality of pursuing them." It was a reasonable concern, Zelda had to admit. She had seen plenty of young women arrive in cities with stars in their eyes, only to be exploited by unscrupulous managers, landlords, and men who promised everything and delivered nothing. And she has agreed to this arrangement. She does not know yet, Ryder admitted. I wanted to secure your agreement first. Rebecca can be stubborn, and I did not want to promise her something I could not deliver. The Xavier Ranch came into view around midday, and Zelda felt her breath catch at the sight. The main house was a solid two-story structure built from local timber and stone, with a wide porch and large windows that looked out over rolling pastures. Several outbuildings dotted the property. A large barn, a stable, a bunkhouse for ranch hands, and a small cabin set apart from the other structures. That will be your quarters, Ryder said, gesturing to the cabin. It was originally built for my father's foreman, but he retired last year and moved to Pueblo. I have had it cleaned and furnished for your use. You will have complete privacy, but you are also welcome to take meals in the main house with Rebecca and me. As they approached, Zelda noticed several men working in the corrals, handling horses with practiced skill. They looked up curiously as the wagon passed, but returned quickly to their work. Ranch life did not pause for new arrivals. A young woman burst out of the main house before Ryder had even fully stopped the wagon. Ryder Xavier was tall and slim, with the same dark hair as her brother, but with blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence and energy. She wore a simple dress that had clearly been modified for practical ranch work, with the skirts shortened to avoid dragging in the dirt. "You actually did it," Rebecca exclaimed, looking from her brother to Zelda with undisguised excitement. "You hired an actress to be my companion. You knew." Ryder asked, climbing down from the wagon. "I heard you talking to Samuel about it last week. I have been hoping it would actually happen." Rebecca turned her full attention to Zelda, who was still sitting on the wagon seat. "Miss Crawford, I have attended every single one of your performances in Bonanza. You are absolutely magnificent. The way you commanded that stage, the emotion in your voice, I have practiced trying to replicate it, but I cannot capture what you do naturally." Zelda found herself smiling despite her earlier melancholy. Rebecca's enthusiasm was infectious and genuine. "You practiced my performances. Every single one. I have been driving Ryder mad by reciting your lines at dinner." Rebecca grabbed Zelda's hand to help her down from the wagon. "Please tell me you will stay. Ryder said it would just be a trial period, but I hope you will love it here so much that you never want to leave." "Rebecca, let Miss Crawford catch her breath," Ryder said with amused exasperation. "She has had a long journey." But Zelda was charmed by the girl's openness. "Please call me Zelda, and I am happy to be here, truly." Over the next few hours, Zelda settled into the cabin that would be her home for the foreseeable future. It was small but well appointed, with a main room that served as both sitting area and bedroom, a functional iron stove for cooking and heating, and real glass windows that let in abundant light. The furniture was simple but sturdy. A bed with a real mattress, a table and 2 chairs, a wardrobe for clothes, and even a small bookshelf. "I brought some books from the main house," Rebecca explained as she helped Zelda unpack. "I was not sure what you liked to read, but I included some poetry and novels. We have a fairly good collection, actually. My mother was an educated woman, and my father believed in the importance of books." "This is lovely, Rebecca. Thank you." "You should know that I am not looking for a strict governess," Rebecca said suddenly, her expression turning serious. "I do not need someone to teach me penmanship or proper posture. I need someone who can help me understand the world beyond this ranch, someone who can tell me honestly what it is like to pursue your dreams." Zelda sat on the edge of the bed, studying the earnest young woman before her. "Why is that so important to you?" "Because I feel like I am suffocating here sometimes," Rebecca said with raw honesty. "I love Ryder, and I know he is doing his best to take care of me, but he sees danger everywhere, and he wants to protect me from every possible harm. I understand why our mother died, our father died, and he has been responsible for me since he was barely more than a boy himself. But I am not fragile, and I am not going to break just because life is difficult. What do you want to do with your life? I want to see cities. I want to go to concerts and museums and theaters. I want to meet interesting people and have conversations about ideas instead of cattle prices and weather patterns. Rebecca's blue eyes were bright with longing. And maybe, eventually, I want to fall in love with someone I choose, not just marry the nearest rancher's son because that is the practical option. Zelda recognized herself in Rebecca's words, the same yearning for something more that had driven her to leave Missouri 6 years ago. Those are good dreams, Rebecca. You should hold on to them. But you understand that dreams are not easy, right? That is what I need someone to tell me honestly. Ryder thinks if he just keeps me here long enough, I will give up on these ideas and settle down. But I need to know the truth, good and bad, so I can make real decisions about my future. I can tell you the truth, Zelda promised, both the beautiful parts and the difficult parts, but you have to promise to actually listen and not just hear what you want to hear. Rebecca nodded solemnly. I promise. That evening, Zelda joined Ryder and Rebecca for dinner in the main house. The dining room was warm and welcoming, with a large table that could seat 8 and windows that overlooked the mountains. A woman named Maria, who came from a nearby homestead to cook and clean several times a week, had prepared a hearty meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. The conversation during dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Ryder and Rebecca clearly had an easy rapport built on years of shared experiences, and they made room for Zelda in their dynamic without awkwardness. Ryder asked thoughtful questions about her theatrical career, showing genuine interest in the practical aspects of stage production and touring. How do traveling companies decide which towns to visit? He asked, passing the bowl of potatoes. It depends on the circuit and the company's reputation, Zelda explained. Larger, more established companies can book into proper theaters in cities. Smaller companies often follow the railroad lines, stopping in any town that has a hall large enough for a stage. You go where you think people will pay to see you perform. That sounds financially precarious. It is. Many performers live one bad week away from destitution. That is why most of us chase contracts with established theaters. The steady pay and reliable audiences make all the difference. Is that why the San Francisco contract was so important to you? Rebecca asked softly. Zelda nodded, feeling the familiar ache of lost opportunity. It represented stability and recognition, 2 things I have been chasing for 6 years. But apparently, family connections matter more than signed contracts. That is deeply unfair, Rebecca said with feeling. Fairness is not a luxury most people can afford, Ryder observed quietly. You can only control your own actions and integrity, not other people's choices. It was a pragmatic philosophy born from a life of hard work and loss, and Zelda could not argue with the underlying truth. She had spent years being angry at the unfairness of the theatrical world, and it had gotten her nowhere. After dinner, Rebecca pulled Zelda into the parlor to show her the piano, an upright instrument that had clearly seen better days but was still functional. Will you play something? Rebecca asked eagerly. I want to hear how a real performer sounds. Zelda sat at the piano and ran her fingers over the keys, feeling their familiar resistance. She began with a simple ballad, her trained voice filling the room with rich, clear notes. When she finished, both Rebecca and Ryder, who had followed them into the parlor, looked genuinely moved. That was beautiful, Ryder said quietly. His gray eyes held an expression Zelda could not quite read, something between appreciation and sadness. "Again," Rebecca pleaded. "Teach me that one." They spent the next hour working on the ballad together, with Zelda patiently correcting Rebecca's breathing and posture. The girl had natural talent and a good ear, but lacked the technical training that would help her develop her abilities. "You have a lovely voice," Zelda told her honestly. "With proper training, you could perform professionally if you wanted to." Rebecca's face lit up. "Really? You are not just saying that to be kind." "I would not lie about that. Talent is too rare to patronize with false praise." When Zelda finally returned to her cabin that night, she felt a surprising sense of contentment. The day had not gone at all as she expected when she woke up that morning in Bonanza. She was no longer an actress preparing for a glorious future in San Francisco, but perhaps this unexpected detour would not be entirely terrible. The next weeks settled into a pleasant routine. Zelda spent her mornings working with Rebecca on literature, music, and what Rebecca called understanding the world. They read novels and poetry together, discussed philosophy and art, and Zelda shared stories from her years in the theater. But she also made good on her promise to be honest about the difficulties. "Being an actress means constant rejection," Zelda explained one morning as they sat on the porch of the main house, enjoying the late summer sunshine. "For every role you win, you lose 20 others. You face managers who think your talents are inadequate, audiences who prefer other performers, and critics who can destroy your reputation with a single review. And as a woman, you also face men who assume that actress is synonymous with woman of questionable morals." "But you persisted anyway," Rebecca said, "because the joy of performing outweighed the pain of rejection, at least until recently. When you are on stage, connecting with an audience, making them feel something real, there is no other experience quite like it. That is what kept me going through all the difficult times. And now that the San Francisco contract fell through, do you still want to perform?" Zelda considered the question carefully. "I honestly do not know. Part of me wants to fight my way back, to prove that I deserve recognition. But another part of me is tired, Rebecca. Tired of fighting, tired of being disappointed, tired of never having a real home. Maybe home is something you have to create, not something you find," Rebecca suggested thoughtfully. It was a wise observation from someone so young, and it stayed with Zelda as she went about her days. The ranch had a rhythm and stability that her theatrical life had always lacked. There was something deeply satisfying about waking up in the same place each morning, about knowing where she would sleep each night, about having meaningful work that made a difference to someone. She also found herself noticing Ryder more than she intended. He was often busy with ranch work, riding out early to check on cattle and horses, supervising his small crew of ranch hands, and managing the countless details that kept a large operation running. But when he was around the main house, he always made time to ask about her day and Rebecca's progress. "She seems happier," he commented one evening when they found themselves alone on the porch after Rebecca had gone to bed. "More settled somehow. She is getting to explore ideas and possibilities without judgment," Zelda said. "That is all she really wanted. I owe you thanks for that." "I have been worried about her for a long time." Ryder leaned against the porch railing, his silhouette outlined against the darkening sky. "I know I am overprotective. It is hard to find the balance between keeping her safe and letting her live. You are doing better than you think. Rebecca knows you love her, and that matters more than occasional overprotection. Do you have siblings, Zelda?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "2 younger brothers. They are still on the family farm in Missouri, probably married with children by now. I have not been back in 6 years. You miss them. Sometimes. But we were never particularly close. They thought I was foolish for wanting to leave, for chasing dreams instead of accepting a practical life. She paused, then added, I think they were probably right in their way. Dreams have not gotten me very far. Dreams got you to stages throughout the West, performing for audiences who needed beauty in their lives. That seems pretty far to me. And yet here I am, a failed actress working as a governess on a ranch. Ryder turned to look at her directly, his gray eyes serious in the lamplight spilling from the house. You are not a failed actress. You are an accomplished performer who had one contract stolen by someone with unfair advantages. That does not erase everything you have achieved. You are being kind. I am being honest. There is a difference. He smiled slightly. I think you told Rebecca the same thing about truth and flattery. Zelda felt her cheeks warm. I suppose I did. They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out and one of the horses in the stable whinnied in response. The air was cooling rapidly now that the sun had set, and Zelda wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. I should let you get back to your cabin, Ryder said, though he made no move to leave. But I wanted you to know that having you here has made a real difference, not just for Rebecca but for me as well. It is good to have someone to talk to about things beyond ranch business. I have enjoyed our conversations, Zelda admitted. You are thoughtful and intelligent, which is not always qualities I have found in abundance. Careful, Miss Crawford. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was definitely a compliment, Mr. Xavier. His smile widened, transforming his weathered face into something approaching handsome. Then I will accept it graciously and bid you good night. As Zelda walked back to her cabin through the darkness, she found herself thinking about Ryder in ways that had nothing to do with their professional relationship. He was unlike any man she had known in the theater world. There was no artifice to him, no performance. He was solid and dependable, yet also capable of surprising gentleness and insight. September arrived with cooler temperatures, and the first hints of fall color in the aspen trees scattered across the mountains. Zelda had been at the ranch for nearly a month, and the rhythms of this new life had become familiar. She rose early, took breakfast in her cabin, and spent mornings with Rebecca working on various subjects. Afternoons were often spent reading or writing letters, and evenings usually included dinner with Rebecca and Ryder. One afternoon, Rebecca convinced Zelda to go riding with her across the ranch property. Zelda had some experience with horses from her years traveling between towns, but she was far from an expert rider. Rebecca, by contrast, had grown up on horseback and rode with natural ease. I want to show you my favorite place, Rebecca said as they followed a trail that wound up into the foothills. It is where I go when I need to think. They rode for nearly an hour, climbing steadily until they reached a small meadow surrounded by pine trees. A stream ran through the center of the clearing, and the view of the valley below was spectacular. Zelda could see the ranch buildings looking small in the distance, and beyond them, the town of Bonanza was just visible through the afternoon haze. This is beautiful, Zelda said, dismounting carefully. My father brought me here when I was 13, Rebecca said, tying her horse to a tree. It was right after my mother died, and I was angry at everything. I kept asking why God would take her from us, and my father said he did not have answers, but that sometimes being in a place of beauty helped him find peace. We sat here for hours that day, not really talking, just being together. After he died, I started coming here on my own whenever I felt overwhelmed. They sat by the stream, and Zelda listened as Rebecca talked about her fears and hopes. The girl was remarkably articulate about her internal struggles, trying to honor her family's legacy while also wanting to forge her own path. "Ryder sacrificed so much for me," Rebecca said quietly. "After our father died, he could have sold the ranch and moved to a city where life would have been easier. But he kept it going because he knew this land mattered to our family. He put his own dreams aside to make sure I had a home and security. How can I tell him that the very thing he worked so hard to preserve is the thing I want to escape?" "I do not think Ryder sees it that way," Zelda said gently. "He wants you to be happy, even if that means leaving the ranch eventually. He is just afraid of you getting hurt in the process." "Were your parents afraid when you left Missouri?" "My mother cried for 3 days. My father refused to speak to me for a week before I left. They thought I was being selfish and reckless, throwing away security for foolish dreams." Zelda picked up a smooth stone from the stream bank, turning it over in her fingers. "I have spent 6 years trying to prove them wrong, trying to show that I made the right choice. But maybe there is no right choice, just different paths with different challenges." "You regret leaving?" "Sometimes. Especially on hard days when I was hungry or lonely or watching a younger, prettier actress get a role I wanted. But then I would step onto a stage and feel that connection with an audience and the regret would fade. Even if I never become a famous actress, I had those moments. No one can take them from me." They rode back to the ranch in contemplative silence, and when they arrived, they found Ryder in the stable tending to a horse that had thrown a shoe. He looked up as they entered, his eyes going immediately to Zelda with a question she could not quite interpret. "Rebecca showed me her meadow," Zelda explained. "It is a remarkable place." "That spot has always been special to our family," Ryder agreed. He turned his attention back to the horse's hoof, carefully examining it. "I am glad she shared it with you." Over the following weeks, Zelda became increasingly aware of Ryder's presence in ways that went beyond professional courtesy. She noticed how his hands moved with confidence and skill, whether he was handling horses or repairing equipment. She found herself listening for his voice when he returned to the main house each evening. She looked forward to their conversations with an anticipation that had nothing to do with politeness, and she was fairly certain he was noticing her as well. There were small moments. His hand lingering on hers when he helped her down from a wagon, the way his eyes followed her across a room, the slight smile that touched his lips when she said something that amused him. But neither of them acknowledged the growing attraction directly. The situation was too complicated, with Zelda still technically an employee and her future plans uncertain. Yet the awareness hung between them like charged air before a storm. In early October, a telegram arrived from San Francisco. Zelda's former agent had tracked her down through the Bonanza theater manager and was demanding immediate repayment of the $300 advance. The tone of the message was threatening, suggesting legal action if she did not comply within 30 days. Zelda stared at the telegram in her cabin, feeling the familiar weight of anxiety settle over her chest. At $50 per month, it would take her 6 months to save enough to repay the debt, and that assumed she spent nothing on personal expenses. She had no idea how to respond. A knock on her cabin door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened it to find Ryder standing there, his hat in his hands and concern evident on his face. "Rebecca mentioned that you received a telegram," he said. "She was worried about you." Zelda hesitated, then handed him the telegram. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. "This is extortion," he said flatly. "They broke the contract, not you. You have no legal obligation to return money that was compensation for their breach of agreement. I have no way to prove that. They are in San Francisco with lawyers and connections. I am nobody." "You are not nobody." Ryder's voice was fierce. and I will not stand by while someone tries to intimidate you into paying money you do not owe. What am I supposed to do? I cannot afford a lawyer, and even if I could, fighting this would cost more than just paying the debt. Ryder was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. Then he said, I will pay it. Absolutely not. Why not? I have the money, and this is an unjust demand. Consider it a loan if you must, but do not let these people take advantage of you. I will not take your money, Ryder. This is my problem to solve. Then solve it by accepting help from someone who cares about you. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning beyond the immediate situation. Zelda looked at him, this solid, honest man who had given her employment when she needed it, who treated her with respect and genuine friendship, who was now offering to pay a significant sum simply because he did not want her to be taken advantage of. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. Because you deserve better than what this world keeps giving you, Ryder said simply, and because somewhere along the way you became important to me. Zelda felt her breath catch. Ryder, you do not have to say anything right now, just think about letting me help, please. He placed his hat back on his head and turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it is worth, I hope you decide to stay here past the trial period. Not just because Rebecca needs you, but because I've gotten used to having you around, and I would miss you terribly if you left. After he was gone, Zelda sat at her small table, her mind in turmoil. The smart, practical thing would be to accept his help and continue working to repay him over time. But accepting felt like admitting she needed him, like acknowledging that she could not manage her own life without assistance. Yet pride seemed like a foolish reason to refuse when the alternative was either crushing debt or legal troubles she could not afford to fight. The next morning, Zelda found Ryder in the barn before dawn. He was preparing to ride out to check on cattle in the far pastures, saddling his horse with practiced efficiency. I will accept your help with the telegram debt, she said without preamble, but only as a loan, and I will repay every cent. Ryder turned to face her, relief evident on his features. Whatever terms make you comfortable, I will send a bank draft to San Francisco today. Thank you. I know that does not seem like enough to say, but I truly appreciate this. You do not need to thank me. I am just glad I can help. He finished tightening the saddle and moved to check the bridle. Zelda, I need to say something, and I am not particularly good with words, so forgive me if this comes out wrong. What is it? When I first hired you, it was genuinely for Rebecca's benefit. She needed someone like you in her life, and I could provide that opportunity. But somewhere over the past 2 months, my motivations changed. I started looking forward to seeing you each day. I started making excuses to be around the main house more often. I found myself thinking about you when I should have been thinking about ranch business. He looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. I know your future is uncertain and that you may want to return to theatrical work eventually. But I need you to know that if you choose to stay, it would not just be as Rebecca's companion. It would be as someone I care for deeply, someone I could see building a life with. Zelda had been proposed to before by theater managers and wealthy patrons who saw her as either a trophy or a mistress. But Ryder's words were different. He was not offering to possess her or to keep her. He was offering partnership, respect, and genuine affection. I do not know what my future holds, Zelda said honestly. 2 months ago, I was so certain of my path, and then everything fell apart. Being here has been good for me, healing even. But I do not know if I am ready to give up on my dreams entirely. I am not asking you to give up anything. I am just asking you to consider that maybe your dreams can evolve. Maybe there is room for both the stage and something else, someone else. He smiled slightly. I am a patient man, Zelda. I'm not demanding an answer today or tomorrow. I just wanted you to know how I feel. That is fair. And Ryder, for what it is worth, I care for you too, more than I expected to when I arrived here." His smile widened, transforming his whole face. "Then that is enough for now. The rest can unfold in its own time." He rode out shortly after, leaving Zelda standing in the barn with her emotions in chaos. She had spent 6 years carefully guarding her heart, knowing that attachments made it harder to chase opportunities wherever they might arise. But Ryder had somehow slipped past those defenses, his steady presence and quiet kindness creating space for feelings she had not anticipated. October brought the first snow to the high mountains, dusting the peaks with white, while the valleys remained in autumn colors. The ranch work shifted toward winter preparations, with Ryder and his hands bringing cattle down from summer pastures and stockpiling hay and supplies for the cold months ahead. Zelda continued her work with Rebecca, but their relationship had evolved beyond formal lessons into genuine friendship. They read together, discussed everything from literature to local gossip, and Rebecca began confiding in Zelda about a young man named Thomas who worked on a neighboring ranch. "He is smart and kind, and he does not treat me like a child," Rebecca said one afternoon as they worked on needlework together. Zelda was teaching her decorative stitching, though neither of them was particularly skilled at it. But Ryder barely acknowledges him when he comes around, and I know it is because he thinks I am too young to be thinking about romance. "Are you interested in romance, or are you interested in Thomas specifically?" Zelda asked. Rebecca considered the question seriously. "I think both. I want to experience falling in love, that much I know. And Thomas seems like someone I could fall in love with, given the chance. But how do I know if what I feel is real or just wanting to feel something?" "That is one of the great challenges of being human," Zelda said. "We rarely know our true feelings with certainty until we have time and experience to test them. But here is what I have learned. Genuine affection grows stronger with time and knowledge, while infatuation usually fades when reality intrudes. Have you ever been in love?" Zelda paused mid-stitch, thinking about the question. "I thought I was once. There was an actor in a touring company I worked with 5 years ago. He was handsome and talented and said all the right things. But when the company disbanded and he got an offer to join a better troupe, he left without a second thought. I realized then that I had been in love with the idea of him, with the romance of a theatrical partnership, not with who he actually was. And since then, I have been very careful with my heart, or at least I was until recently." Zelda met Rebecca's knowing gaze and felt her cheeks warm. "Your brother is a good man." "He is the best man I know," Rebecca agreed. "And I think you two would be good together if you gave it a chance. I see how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, and I see how you watch for him to come home each evening. It is complicated. Love usually is, but that does not make it less worth pursuing." That evening, Ryder asked Zelda if she would ride out with him to check on some equipment stored in a lined shack about an hour from the main ranch. It was the kind of excuse that did not quite hold up to scrutiny, but Zelda agreed anyway, curious about what he really wanted. They rode through the late afternoon, the autumn air crisp and clean. The lined shack was a small, weathered building used by ranch hands when they were working far from the main house. Ryder spent about 5 minutes checking on tools and supplies, then suggested they rest the horses before heading back. "You did not actually need to check on this equipment, did you?" Zelda asked as they sat on a fallen log outside the shack, watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. "Not particularly," Ryder admitted. "I wanted to talk to you away from the ranch without Rebecca or the hands around. I have been thinking about what I said a few weeks ago about my feelings for you. I have been thinking about it too. Have you reached any conclusions? Zelda looked at the landscape stretched before them, golden in the slanting light. I have concluded that life rarely works out the way we plan, and sometimes that is a blessing rather than a curse. When I came to your ranch, I thought I was accepting temporary employment while I figured out how to resurrect my theatrical career. But what I have found here is something I did not know I was missing. What is that? Peace, community, purpose that matters beyond applause and reviews. She turned to look at him directly. And if I am being completely honest, I have found you, the possibility of you, of us. Ryder's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held barely contained hope. What does that possibility look like to you? I do not know exactly. I still love the theater. I still dream about performing. But those dreams do not feel as urgent as they once did, and I am not sure if that is growth or giving up. Maybe it is neither. Maybe it is just your priorities shifting as you discover new things that make you happy. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. I know I cannot offer you the excitement of stage life or the glamour of cities, but I can offer you a home, respect, partnership, and more love than you probably know what to do with. That is quite an offer, Mr. Xavier. Is it enough to make you consider staying permanently? Zelda looked at their joined hands, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones. Yes, it is enough to make me consider staying, but I need time, Ryder. I need to be sure I am choosing this life because I truly want it, not because I am running away from disappointment. Take all the time you need. I told you before, I am a patient man. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I will wait as long as it takes for you to be certain. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but comfortable, the silence between them filled with understanding rather than awkwardness. When they arrived, Rebecca gave them both a knowing look but said nothing, which was perhaps more telling than any comment would have been. November arrived with serious cold and the first significant snowfall in the valley. The ranch settled into winter routines, with animals kept closer to the main buildings and work focused on maintenance and planning for spring. Zelda found she enjoyed the coziness of winter on the ranch, the way everyone drew together against the cold. She and Ryder continued to grow closer, though they maintained propriety given the circumstances. But there were small intimacies. His hand on her back as he guided her across icy ground, the way she would adjust his scarf when he came in from the cold, the long conversations by the fire in the main house after Rebecca had gone to bed. Tell me about your favorite performance, Ryder said one such evening, both of them nursing cups of hot coffee. Not the most successful or the most well-reviewed, your favorite. Zelda thought back over 6 years of performances. There was a small town in New Mexico. I cannot even remember the name now. We performed in a converted barn because there was no proper theater. The audience was maybe 30 people, mostly miners and ranchers and a few families. We did a simple melodrama, the kind of story that theater critics would have dismissed as too sentimental. What made it special? The way they watched. They were completely absorbed, hanging on every word and gesture. When the hero and heroine finally reunited at the end, several of the miners were openly weeping. After the performance, an elderly woman came backstage and told me that it was the first time she had seen a theatrical performance in 40 years, and it reminded her of why she fell in love with her husband. Zelda smiled at the memory. We made less money from that performance than we spent on travel to reach the town, but I felt like we had given those people something valuable, a moment of beauty and emotion in their hard lives. That is what drew you to performing, the ability to affect people that way. Yes. Not the fame or the money, though I would not have turned those down. but the connection, the shared experience of storytelling. For a brief time, strangers become a community united by the same emotions. You can still have that, even if you choose ranch life over theatrical touring. How? Bonanza needs culture. The opera house is popular precisely because people crave what you described. You could teach theater classes, direct local productions, share your skills with a permanent community instead of temporary audiences. Ryder leaned forward, his expression earnest. I am not suggesting you give up performing. I am suggesting you consider a different model for it. It was an idea Zelda had not considered, and it stirred something in her chest. She had always assumed that leaving the touring life meant abandoning the stage entirely. But what if there was a middle path? That is an interesting thought, she said slowly. Just something to consider. No pressure, no expectations. I just want you to know that choosing a life here does not mean abandoning everything you love about performing. That conversation stayed with Zelda over the following weeks. She began to imagine what it might look like to establish herself as a theater teacher and director in Bonanza. The town was growing, and there was genuine appetite for cultural offerings. She could potentially have both a home and a theatrical career, albeit on a smaller scale than she had once envisioned. In mid-December, Zelda received a letter from her former agent. The tone was markedly different from the threatening telegram. The agent explained that Ryder's bank draft had been received, and the debt was considered settled. But then the letter continued with unexpected information. The actress who had replaced Zelda in the San Francisco contract had proven unreliable, missing performances and alienating the company. The Montgomery Theater was now looking for a new leading lady, and if Zelda was interested, her original contract could potentially be reinstated. Zelda read the letter 3 times, her emotions in chaos. This was what she had wanted, what she had been working toward for years. The prestigious contract, the stable position with a respected company, the validation of her talents. But the thought of leaving the ranch, of saying goodbye to Rebecca and Ryder, filled her with dread rather than excitement. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. She needed time to think, to sort through what she truly wanted versus what she had always believed she should want. For 3 days, Zelda wrestled with the decision. She continued her routines with Rebecca, shared meals with the Xavier siblings, and participated in the ranch's preparations for Christmas. But her mind was elsewhere, constantly weighing options and possibilities. On the 4th day, Ryder found her in her cabin in the late afternoon. She was sitting at her small table, staring at the letter she had taken out again. "Rebecca told me you received correspondence from San Francisco," he said quietly. "She is worried about you. They want me back. The contract could be reinstated if I return immediately." Zelda looked up at him, searching his face for direction she knew he would not give. "This is what I have been working toward for years. I know. You are not going to try to convince me to stay. No, because this has to be your choice, made for your own reasons." Ryder pulled out the second chair and sat across from her. "If you want that contract, if it will make you happy, then you should go. I will miss you terribly, and Rebecca will be heartbroken, but we will survive. Your dreams matter, Zelda. They have always mattered. What if I do not want to go? Then do not go. But make sure you are staying because you want this life, not because you feel obligated or afraid to pursue other options." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you. I should have said it before now, but I love you. I want you to stay and build a life with me. But not at the cost of your dreams and your happiness." Tears welled in Zelda's eyes. "I love you too. That is what makes this so hard. I came here expecting nothing, and I found everything I did not know I needed. What does your heart tell you to do?" Zelda looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his work, roughened skin, and her softer fingers that had never done hard labor. My heart tells me that standing on a stage in San Francisco would feel hollow now, knowing what I was giving up to be there. My heart tells me that home is not a place but people who matter to you. And my heart tells me that I would be a fool to walk away from a man who loves me enough to support my choices, even when they break his heart. Ryder's grip on her hand tightened. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I choose you, Ryder. I choose Rebecca and this ranch and the possibility of building something lasting. I choose a different kind of dream, one I did not know existed until I found it here. Zelda wiped at her tears with her free hand. The agent told me I had been replaced, that my contract was void and my services were no longer needed. But you smiled and offered me something better. You gave me a choice and I am choosing you, if you will still have me. Ryder stood abruptly, pulling her up with him and into his arms. If I will still have you. Zelda, I have been yours since the day I watched you perform in Bonanza and realized that all the beautiful, complicated, talented chaos of you was exactly what had been missing from my life. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the staged kisses Zelda had performed countless times on various stages. This was real and raw and perfect, tasting of coffee and hope and promises yet to be made. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Zelda laughed through her tears. I should probably inform the Montgomery Theater of my decision. Probably, Ryder agreed, his smile wide and unrestrained, but maybe not right this moment. He kissed her again, and Zelda thought that she had spent years performing grand romantic scenes for audiences. But nothing had ever felt as genuinely romantic as this moment in a simple cabin on a Colorado ranch, choosing love over ambition and finding it was exactly the right choice. They told Rebecca that evening over dinner, though the girl claimed she had known it was coming for weeks. The way you two look at each other is positively theatrical, she said with a grin, in the best possible way. Does this mean you are staying permanently? Rebecca asked Zelda, her blue eyes bright with hope. If your brother makes an honest woman of me, then yes, I am staying. Is that a proposal? Ryder asked, amused. You want it to be. Actually, I have been carrying this around for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Ryder pulled a small box from his vest pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small sapphire. It was my mother's ring. Rebecca and I both agreed that she would have wanted you to have it, if you would accept. Zelda took the box with trembling fingers, overwhelmed by the gesture and what it represented. This is your family ring. Are you certain you are going to be family? Rebecca said firmly, which makes it entirely appropriate. Then yes, absolutely yes. I would be honored to wear your mother's ring and to become part of this family. Ryder slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant for her. They married in early February 1883, in a small ceremony at the church in Bonanza with Rebecca as the witness and several ranch hands in attendance. Zelda wore a simple dress of dark green wool that she had modified with lace trim, more practical than glamorous but entirely appropriate for a winter wedding in the mountains. After the ceremony, they held a reception at the Grand Opera House, where Harold Mitchell had donated the space for the occasion. Many of the people who had attended Zelda's performances came to wish the newlyweds well, and several asked if she would ever perform again. I have plans, Zelda told them with a smile. But for now, I am focusing on being a wife and continuing to work with Rebecca. What she did not mention yet were the detailed plans she and Ryder had been developing. Ryder had agreed to fund a proper theater school in Bonanza, with Zelda as the primary instructor. They would offer classes in acting, voice, and stagecraft to anyone interested, and eventually stage productions that would rival anything in larger cities. It would be Zelda's theatrical career, just structured differently than she had once imagined. And the best part was that she would build it in partnership with someone who believed in her completely. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Zelda moved from her cabin into the main house, occupying the master bedroom with Ryder while Rebecca maintained her own room down the hall. Learning to share space with another person, to negotiate daily routines and personal habits, required patience and humor from both of them. But the foundation of genuine affection and respect made the adjustments easier. Ryder was considerate of Zelda's need for time alone to read and write, and she learned to appreciate the rhythms of ranch life that governed his schedule. They settled into comfortable patterns, finding small rituals that became their own traditions. Every evening after dinner, weather permitting, they would walk together around the ranch property, talking about their days and making plans for the future. Ryder would tell her about challenges with the cattle or horses, and Zelda would share ideas for the theater school she was planning. "I was thinking we could start with basic classes in the spring," Zelda said one evening in March as they walked through the last of the melting snow. "Voice training, movement, maybe some scene study. Gauge interest and build from there. Have you thought about where to hold the classes? The Opera House is often booked with touring companies. I was actually thinking we could convert one of the barns on the ranch, at least temporarily. It would give students the experience of working in a non-traditional space, which is useful training for touring performers." Ryder stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "You would be comfortable with that, having students coming to the ranch regularly?" "This is my home now, too. I want to contribute to it in meaningful ways, and teaching is something I can do that also serves the community." Zelda took his hands in hers. "Unless you would prefer to keep the ranch separate from my theatrical pursuits, I would prefer whatever makes you happy. If you want to turn the entire ranch into a theater school, I would support that, though the cattle might have opinions about giving up their barn space." Zelda laughed and kissed him, still marveling at how easy it was to be with this man who understood her in ways no one else ever had. Rebecca thrived under the continued attention and education Zelda provided. By spring, she had developed genuine skill in music and performance, though she had also begun to seriously court Thomas from the neighboring ranch. Ryder had reluctantly accepted that his sister was growing up and making her own choices, though he still maintained protective oversight. "I want her to be happy," Ryder confided to Zelda one night as they lay in bed, his arms around her in the darkness. "But I also remember being 18 and thinking I understood the world far better than I actually did. How do I balance letting her make choices with protecting her from mistakes?" "You cannot protect her from everything," Zelda said gently. "And honestly, mistakes are often how we learn what we truly want. I made plenty of mistakes in my theatrical career, including trusting people who did not deserve it and pursuing opportunities that were not worth the cost. But those mistakes taught me to recognize genuine value when I finally found it here with you. You think Thomas is genuine. I think he is a decent young man who treats Rebecca with respect and shares her interests in ranching and building a life in this area. That is more than many women get in marriage prospects. When did you become the wise one in this relationship? I have always been wise. You are just now noticing." Zelda turned in his arms to face him. "I know it is hard to watch her grow up and start thinking about leaving. But Rebecca is not really leaving. She is just expanding her life to include someone else, the same way I expanded mine to include you." Ryder pulled her closer, his lips finding hers in the darkness. Their physical relationship had developed naturally, with a passion that surprised both of them. Zelda had never experienced this kind of intimacy before, having always been too focused on her career to invest in relationships. But with Ryder, everything felt right, from the way their bodies fit together to the quiet conversations in the aftermath. By summer, Zelda had successfully established the Bonanza Theater Academy, operating out of a converted barn on the Xavier Ranch. She started with 12 students ranging in age from 14 to 30, all eager to learn performance skills. The classes met 3 times per week, and Zelda taught everything from vocal projection to physical movement to character development. The students came from varied backgrounds: miners' daughters looking for refinement, young men hoping to join traveling theater companies, older women who had always dreamed of performing but never had the opportunity. Zelda treated them all with the same respect and high expectations, pushing them to develop their skills while also being honest about the realities of theatrical life. "It is harder than it looks," she told her beginning class during their first session. "Performing requires discipline, persistence, and the ability to handle constant criticism. But if you truly love it, if you feel that spark of connection when you embody a character or move an audience, then it is worth every difficulty." She also made good on her promise to Rebecca to direct a local production. In August, the Bonanza Theater Academy staged a production of Our American Cousin, the popular comedy that had been President Lincoln's favorite. Zelda directed while also playing one of the lead roles, and Rebecca played the ingenue with surprising skill. The production sold out all 3 performances at the Grand Opera House, with audiences praising both the quality of the acting and the innovative staging. Several Denver newspapers sent critics who wrote glowing reviews, noting that Bonanza was developing a genuine cultural scene under Zelda Xavier's leadership. "I am proud of you," Ryder told her after the final performance, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. "You have built something remarkable here. We built it together," Zelda corrected. "None of this would have been possible without your support and investment. The money was easy. You provided the vision and the hard work." That night, after the last of the congratulations had been offered and the theater had emptied, Zelda stood alone on the stage looking out at the empty seats. She thought about how different her life was now compared to what she had imagined 2 years ago. She was not a famous actress in San Francisco. She had not achieved the prestigious contract or the widespread recognition she had once craved. But she had something better: a home, a husband who loved and respected her, a sister-in-law who had become like family, and a meaningful career teaching the next generation of performers. She was making a real difference in her community, bringing culture and beauty to people's lives in tangible ways. The stage lights cast long shadows through the empty theater, and Zelda felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. She had been replaced in San Francisco, discarded like a worn-out costume. But Ryder had smiled and offered her a different choice, a better choice. And in choosing him, she had found the life she did not know she needed. Footsteps echoed through the theater, and Zelda turned to see Ryder walking down the aisle toward the stage. "I thought I might find you here," he said, climbing the steps to join her. "Savoring your triumph, just reflecting on how life works out in unexpected ways. Are you happy?" He asked it seriously, as if her answer truly mattered to him more than anything else. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Zelda said honestly. "I spent years chasing one definition of success, and I was miserable even when I achieved small victories. But this, what we have built here together, this feels like genuine success. Like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Ryder wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder as they both looked out at the empty theater. "I fell in love with you watching you on this stage," he said quietly. "Watching you command attention and bring characters to life. I thought you were the most magnificent thing I had ever seen. And now that you know I am just a regular person with doubts and insecurities, now I love you even more, because I get to see all of who you are, not just the performance. Though I still think you are pretty magnificent." Zelda turned in his arms and kissed him deeply, grateful beyond words for this unexpected love that had changed everything. "Take me home," she said when they finally pulled apart. "Our home." As they left the theater and climbed into the wagon for the ride back to the ranch, Zelda looked up at the stars scattered across the clear Colorado sky. She had traveled so many miles, performed on so many stages, and weathered so many disappointments to arrive at this moment. And while the path had not been what she expected, the destination was better than any dream she had dared to imagine. The seasons continued their inevitable march, and life on the Xavier Ranch settled into comfortable rhythms. By fall of 1883, Rebecca and Thomas had announced their engagement, planning a spring wedding that would unite two ranching families. Zelda helped Rebecca with wedding preparations while continuing to teach at the theater academy and planning future productions. In December, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Ryder on Christmas morning, presenting him with a small pair of knitted booties that Maria had helped her make. "We are going to have a baby," she said, watching his face carefully for his reaction. Ryder stared at the booties for a long moment, then looked up at her with such joy and wonder that Zelda felt tears spring to her eyes. "A baby. We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it. You have given me everything, Zelda. Love, partnership, purpose, and now this." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she were suddenly fragile. "Thank you. I had some help with the process," Zelda teased, making him laugh. Rebecca was thrilled at the prospect of becoming an aunt, and the whole household spent the winter preparing for the new arrival. Zelda continued teaching through the early months of her pregnancy, only reluctantly reducing her schedule as her condition became more obvious. "I am pregnant, not invalid," she protested when Ryder suggested she stop teaching entirely. "I know, but I worry." "You always worry. It is part of your charm." Zelda kissed him to soften her words. "I will be sensible, I promise, but I need to stay active and engaged. Sitting around waiting for the baby will drive me mad." She compromised by focusing more on directing and coaching rather than performing herself, and she trained several of her advanced students to assist with teaching basic classes. The theater academy had grown to over 30 regular students, and there was talk of building a dedicated performance space separate from the opera house. Rebecca's wedding took place in April 1884, a beautiful ceremony followed by a reception at the Xavier Ranch. Thomas proved to be a good match for Rebecca, sharing her intelligence and supporting her continued interest in culture and learning. They would live on the neighboring ranch, close enough for regular visits, but far enough to establish their own household. "I am going to miss having you here every day," Zelda told Rebecca the night before the wedding. "You have become like a true sister to me." "You will not get rid of me that easily," Rebecca promised. "I will be visiting constantly, especially after the baby arrives. Someone needs to teach my niece or nephew about proper theatrical technique." "How do you know I want my child to be theatrical? Please. Your child will not have a choice with you as a mother. They will probably be performing Shakespeare sonnets before they can walk." Zelda laughed, acknowledging the truth in Rebecca's words. She did hope her child would love the arts, though she would support whatever path they chose to follow. The baby arrived in July 1884, a healthy boy with dark hair and gray eyes like his father. They named him Raymond Ezra Xavier, honoring both family tradition and the new beginning he represented. Ryder was surprisingly adept with the infant, handling the tiny boy with gentle confidence that suggested he had always been meant to be a father. "I think he has your nose," Ryder said one evening as they sat together watching Raymond sleep in his cradle. "Poor child, doomed to carry my features." "Your features are beautiful. He will be a handsome boy and then a handsome man, and we will have to fight off admirers with a stick." "That is years away. Let us just enjoy having a baby for now." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Zelda reduced her teaching schedule significantly, focusing on her family while still maintaining involvement with the theater academy. She directed one production that fall, managing rehearsals around Raymond's feeding schedule, and was pleased to find that her students rose to the challenge of working more independently. By Raymond's first birthday in 1885, life had found a new equilibrium. Zelda taught 3 days a week, directed occasional productions, and spent the rest of her time with her family. Ryder continued running the ranch with the same competence he had always shown, and together they raised their son in an environment filled with love, culture, and hard work. Rebecca and Thomas welcomed their first child, a daughter named Clara, when Raymond was 2. The cousins would grow up together, playing on the ranches and attending Zelda's theater classes as they got older. On a summer evening in 1886, 4 years after Zelda had first arrived at the Xavier Ranch, she and Ryder sat on the porch of the main house watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Raymond played at their feet with wooden blocks, building towers and knocking them down with gleeful laughter. "You ever regret it?" Ryder asked quietly. "Giving up the San Francisco contract and the chance at fame?" Zelda considered the question seriously, as she always did when he asked variations of it over the years. "No, I think about it sometimes, wonder what that life would have been like, but I do not regret my choice. This life, here with you and Raymond and Rebecca and everyone we have built community with, this is better than any stage in San Francisco could have been. Even when the glamour wears off and it is just daily life, especially then. Because daily life with people you love, doing work that matters, that is the real performance. That is the story worth living." She reached over and took his hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after years of practice. "You offered me a choice when I thought I had no options. You smiled and said choose me instead, and I made the best decision of my life." "I am the one who got lucky," Ryder said. "A beautiful, talented woman agreed to marry a simple rancher and build a life in the mountains. I won more than I deserved. You deserve everything. You are the kindest, most supportive partner anyone could ask for. You let me be myself, pursue my passions, and create the life I needed rather than forcing me into a predetermined role." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son play and the sun sink lower toward the horizon. The ranch spread out before them, land they had nurtured and built their lives on. In the distance, Bonanza was visible, the town where Zelda had once performed nightly and where her theater academy now flourished. "I have been thinking," Zelda said eventually, "about expanding the academy, maybe offering summer programs that would attract students from other towns. We could host intensive workshops with guest instructors, really establish Bonanza as a center for theatrical education in Colorado." "Tell me more about this idea," Ryder said, his eyes bright with interest. As Zelda described her vision, Ryder listened with the same attention and support he had always shown for her dreams. They discussed possibilities and logistics, planning together as the sky darkened and stars began to emerge overhead. Raymond eventually tired of his blocks and climbed into Zelda's lap, his small body heavy with approaching sleep. She held him close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair and feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. This was success, she thought. Not fame or acclaim or prestigious contracts, but this moment of peace and connection with people she loved. This was the role she had been meant to play all along. Years continued to pass in steady progression. Raymond grew into a bright, curious boy who loved both ranch life and the theatrical world his mother inhabited. He learned to ride before he could raid, but he also could recite Shakespeare by age 6, a product of his unique upbringing. The Bonanza Theater Academy flourished beyond Zelda's initial dreams. By 1890, they had built a proper performance hall on the edge of town, funded by donations from local businesses and families who appreciated the culture it brought to the community. The Academy's productions attracted audiences from throughout Colorado, and several of Zelda's students went on to successful careers in theater. But Zelda herself rarely performed anymore, content to work behind the scenes as a director and teacher. She had discovered that she loved teaching even more than performing, finding deep satisfaction in helping others develop their skills and pursue their dreams with more support than she had ever received. Ryder and Zelda's family grew to include 2 more children, a daughter named Rose born in 1887, and another son, Marcus, born in 1889. The Xavier Ranch became known throughout the region not just for its quality cattle and horses, but for its role as a cultural center, where ranching and the arts coexisted harmoniously. Rebecca and Thomas had 3 children total, and the families remained close, gathering for holidays and celebrations at the ranch that had become the heart of their extended family. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Ryder surprised Zelda with a trip to Denver to see a professional production at the Tabor Opera House. They left the children with Rebecca and spent 3 days in the city, attending theater, dining at fine restaurants, and enjoying time alone together. "Do you miss this?" Ryder asked as they left the Tabor after watching a lavish production. "The grand theaters, the professional atmosphere. It is wonderful to visit," Zelda said honestly, "but I do not miss it the way I once thought I would. Our theater in Bonanza might be smaller, but it is ours. We built it together, and it serves a real purpose beyond mere entertainment. That matters more to me than prestige. You have become quite the pragmatist over the years, Mrs. Xavier." "I have become content, Mr. Xavier." "There is a difference." She linked her arm through his as they walked back to their hotel. "Though I appreciate you arranging this trip, it is good to remember that we are not just parents and business partners, but also a couple who enjoys each other's company." That night in their hotel room, they made love with the passion and familiarity of a long marriage, and afterward lay tangled together talking about their dreams for the future. "Raymond is asking about college," Ryder said. "He is only 9, but he is already thinking ahead to what he wants to study. He has your mind for planning and details. What does he want to study? Engineering, maybe, or business? He talks about wanting to help modernize ranching practices, make things more efficient." Very different from theatrical pursuits, but just as valid. Each of our children will find their own paths, just like Rebecca did. We just have to support them in making good choices. Listen to you, already worrying about a 9-year-old going to college. "I learned from the best warrior," Ryder said, making her laugh. They returned to the ranch refreshed and more connected than ever, ready to continue building the life they had created together. By the turn of the century, Zelda was 42 years old and at the height of her influence in Colorado theatrical circles. The Bonanza Theater Academy had trained hundreds of students over 18 years, many of whom went on to successful careers. The summer intensive programs she had dreamed about in 1886 were now well established, attracting students from across the Western territories. More importantly, Zelda had created exactly the life she needed. She had a loving marriage, healthy children who were finding their own paths, meaningful work that combined her theatrical passion with community service, and the financial security that had always eluded her during her touring years. "You did it," Rebecca told her at a celebration for the Academy's 20th anniversary in 1904. "You built exactly what you envisioned all those years ago." "We did it," Zelda corrected. "You, me, Ryder, everyone who believed that culture and art matter even in frontier towns. This was never just my dream, it became our shared vision. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had accepted that San Francisco contract?" "Sometimes. But I truly believe I am happier here than I ever would have been there. I have love, family, purpose, and community. That is more than most people get in a lifetime." Ryder joined them, his hair now streaked with gray but his presence still commanding. At 46, he remained strong and capable, though he had started delegating more ranch responsibilities to younger hands, including their son Raymond, who had decided to join the family ranching business after studying agricultural science. "What are my two favorite women discussing?" Ryder asked, wrapping an arm around Zelda's waist. "How lucky we all are," Zelda said, leaning into his embrace. "The luck was all mine," Ryder said, kissing the top of her head. "The day you agreed to come to the ranch, the day you chose to stay, the day you married me, those were the luckiest days of my life." Later that night, after the celebration had ended and their guests had departed, Zelda and Ryder walked their familiar circuit around the ranch property. It was a ritual they had maintained for over 20 years, this evening walk where they talked and planned and simply enjoyed each other's presence. "I have been thinking about succession planning," Ryder said as they paused to look at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Raymond is ready to take on more responsibility with the ranch, and Rose has expressed interest in eventually running the academy. We have built something sustainable that will continue after we are gone. You are thinking about mortality. We are not that old yet. Not mortality exactly. More about legacy, what we leave behind." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I want you to know that loving you, building this life with you, has been the greatest accomplishment of my existence. The ranch, the children, the academy, all of it is wonderful. But the foundation is us, what we created together." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. Even after 22 years of marriage, Ryder could still move her with his straightforward declarations. "I love you too, more now than even when we first married, if that is possible. You gave me everything I needed when I did not even know what that was. We gave each other what we needed. That is how partnerships work." They stood together in the gathering darkness, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had built a life beyond what either had imagined possible. The ranch surrounded them, solid and enduring, a testament to hard work and love. In the main house, their children were gathered for the evening, and laughter drifted across the evening air. Raymond was home from university, Rose was practicing piano, and young Marcus was probably reading by lamplight, already showing signs of becoming a scholar. This was the happy ending Zelda had needed but never known to dream of when she was a young actress chasing fame and recognition. Not a stage in San Francisco, not acclaim from critics, but a home filled with love and a life filled with purpose. "Ready to go inside?" Ryder asked, in a moment. "I just want to stand here and appreciate everything for a little longer." So they stood together under the emerging stars. Two souls who had found their way to each other through circumstance and choice, and who had spent more than 2 decades proving that sometimes the best dreams are the ones you build together rather than chase alone. The agent had told her she had been replaced, that her contract was void and her dreams were finished. But the cowboy had smiled and said, "Choose me instead," offering her a different path forward. And in choosing him, in choosing this life, Zelda had found something far more valuable than any theatrical contract could have provided. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. And that, Zelda thought as Ryder squeezed her hand gently, was the greatest performance of all, the authentic, imperfect, beautiful performance of a life well lived.